in the way of agriculture today, this week. I know I owe Al, um, a behavior tree implementation of going to GPS waypoints, and I have the infrastructure built out, right? Like I have a tool that can take decimal based GPS waypoints and convert them to map points, using raw service. So that's cool. But I still haven't written out the behavior tree that calls that service, so that you can just write out in XML what decimal GPS points you want and have the robot navigate to them using move-based flex. But, I got the math part done.
So how do you connect those GPS points based on just lat long?
So I'm using GPS underscore goal. That's a ROS package that was out there, but I modified it so that it is a service, because to me that seemed more like a service rather than a node. So you send that service lat long, as well as an origin point, and then it does all the projections for you. I'm assuming they're correct. They seem correct. I didn't, do a check myself. And then it spits back your map points. So what I'm envisioning is I would string those map points into a pose, to give to move-based flex.
Okay, really nice. Do you like services more than actions?
So they're almost the same thing, right? I guess actions are more for long. My understanding is actions are more for long-term things that can be preempted. I think that's what an action offers rather than a service. Because I guess the example for services is like add two integers, right? So you give it a request, it spits something back out. So to me, semantically, it made more sense as a service. Would you have implemented as an action?
I don't know. I was wondering about that. The feedback is kind of nice and non-blocking.
Feedback and non-blocking. So by feedback, you mean like whether it was a success, failure, or it was aborted?
Or like intermediate feedback. So like if you made it to waypoint 1, it could send back made it to waypoint 1, and then I don't know
Sure, and I
exactly.
guess move-based flex would be doing that part.
Okay, true. Right. So this is like the add to ints. It builds the path, and then you take that and then send it to the action server.
Right, and it's even simpler than that. You give the service decimal GPS points. It spits out a map pose.
Okay, very cool.
It spits out a what? A map? What was it?
Map coordinates.
Got it.
So
which
is there,
you can use for a pose.
is there anything like additional to that for like what you would want to do at that specific point? I mean, seems like that it's just figuring out where you're going is hard enough, but like put disk in ground at this location, or like what is actually going to occur at that point?
Sure. For now, I think what Al wanted was just to navigate to that point. Although you could. We haven't really built, I guess, what you do once you get to that point yet.
Yeah, I suppose there's different ways to accomplish that, right? But
Right.
like what you do, I don't know. I just thought I'd mention it in case there's some flexibility in what you're doing for the data to leave some space open for something that's not just GPS coordinates, maybe.
Sure. So yeah, with the behavior tree, you can. Wow, I've taken up a lot of these meetings with talking about behavior trees, but I think they're really cool. You could build your behavior tree, such that you go to GPS waypoint, and then after success, it ticks the next child, and you say wait for 10 seconds, do some other action, right? And that action could be put a disc in the ground, like you said, could be turn 90 degrees, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I guess there is some flexibility incorporated in action there, Ross.
Are you treating these as discrete segments? So, in other words, you get to a waypoint and then you, how am I saying this? I'll tell you where I'm headed.
Sure.
So let's take the simple down and back of a tractor disking a field, for example. So it goes, the way I see people approach it is, well, it goes to the end of the field and then you're kind of done and you lift the disc and then you think about doing the turn. You can always see those tractors in the videos. You can pick them out because they go down to the end, they kind of wobble around and then they do something and then, oh, they jerk into a turn. Where if you put a farmer in the seat, he's going to have this very fluid transition between going straight and then starting the turn, lifting the disc. He's already tracking around the turn. If you treat everything as a distinct segment and you don't transition easily between them, things get really wonky. For example, if you navigate to a waypoint before doing something, what happens as you approach that waypoint? Do you just, if you're doing pure pursuit, what happens when your waypoint is less than a look ahead away? Do you shorten the look ahead? Do you just navigate to that point until you get there? In which case, your steering is going to just start thrashing back and forth, or right at the end, because you're navigating to this really close point. So I'll just encourage you to think about trying to make it more fluid and fewer discrete steps there, because they can cause problems.
Sure. No, thanks for the feedback. Right. I'd have to do some thinking of how, in the move-based context, how do we prevent your steering from thrashing, I guess, if you're close enough. I mean, would it just be a matter of increasing the tolerance on your waypoint?
That's what everyone does, right? so then you get this slop and then you have to start saying, well, okay, make the waypoint way out there into the turn. But what you really want to do is you want to hit that waypoint, you want to start your turn immediately. But in order to do that, you've pretty much got to, you've got to have it tighter than that and more what I call fluid, seamless. You need these seamless transitions where your path is continuous. Your path is always growing, for example. Let's say you always grow your path. And so you can always, your tractor can always follow the path and it can always look ahead as far as it can look ahead that standard look ahead distance, probably, which is probably speed sensitive. And then it lifts when it gets to the waypoint immediately, boom. Or it lifts when it gets beyond the waypoint. I really caution against saying something like, I'm going to have a waypoint tolerance. Waypoint tolerance is just a recipe for disappointment. If you just say, I am a meter from the waypoint, I am 10 centimeters away from the waypoint, I'm 2 centimeters beyond the waypoint, better lift. If you start saying, oh, just start lifting so far from the waypoint, or when I'm some distance away from it in a thinking like a radius, there's a circle around the waypoint, and oh, that's good enough. yeah, I really caution against doing that. You're much better off if you have a path and always know where you are along that path and where the waypoint is on that path, and you make your decisions that way. I'm saying this because these are the problems I had with the existing nav solutions, that they didn't do things like this, and so I had to write my own. But
Okay.
if you can
So-
figure out how to do it, that would be awesome.
Okay, so let me try to rephrase. You are suggesting that I compute a path, and once I am, let's say, 90% of the way, from point A to point B, I trigger behavior, and that behavior might be lifting the disk.
I wouldn't make it a percent, but be able to set points along the path that are triggers, if you think that way.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Would
so
another method be to do something like, and I'll just call it anticipation, because you're right, like when you get to the end, you're sort of like doing a bunch of stuff, right? So, but that's sort of dependent on what the task is. So you could prepare to do a specific task, and then depending on when the task is, start that motion sequence within, the next period of time interval.
yeah, there's some sort of anticipation, and I would say at least have the facility to be able to set waypoints along the path. And I really mean that. I caution against having waypoints that are distinct from the path. So having a waypoint that is a point somewhere, an actual point, instead of having it be so far along the path, that's a problem, because you're never going to be exactly on the path. If you're looking at, oh, I'm at an XY of this, and the waypoint is at an XY of this, it's this really clumsy, oh, well, I'm so far away from it. Well, I don't know if I'm so far ahead of it or behind it. Where if you just say, here's my path, and I'm going to set these triggers along the path, it gets a whole lot easier and a whole lot cleaner. And then you can do things like the anticipation. You can then say things like, well, let's look a half a second into the future, and do I have any, do I need to lift? Do I need to lift in the next half a second? Because I know that my hydraulic valve on the lift has a half second latency. Yeah, things like that become really simple. But if, I don't doubt that you will do it this way anyway, but I think if you go waypoints and just try to figure out a distance from them, you're going to find that you have to introduce a lot of slop.
Okay. No, thanks. That's a really good thing to think about, and I'll have to go to the drawing board to see how to implement that in the framework. Cool. Thanks.
I'm looking forward to seeing how you implement a solution, and maybe you'll come up with something that, oh, I hope you come up with something I didn't, and it'll be really cool and standard, because my stuff is not. So good luck.
How are you feeding those data points into, the next thing to actually drive? I mean, is it, I don't know, once per interval, or are you loading them all at the beginning that gets processed through and then goes in a queue somewhere? Or
Yeah. So my current idea will be, you predefine, and I guess this is just step one. You have to be able to go to distinct waypoints before you start computing, smooth paths. But this was just my idea for like a basic mission structure, where I guess you build an XML file, because that's what our behavior tree library takes, with like, let's say 3 waypoints, and it'll go to one waypoint, stop, go to another waypoint, stop, go to another waypoint, stop. And yes, I guess there would there are problems with the tolerances and stuff, but essentially there's a queue structure. But they're all loaded in at the beginning for now.
Yeah, the reason why I mention it is kind of similar to, I guess, maybe what Kyler was saying there too. I can see where if you want to add waypoints in between for specific triggers, you're going to need to think about some way to flush that queue if you need to modify because of error. So like, for instance, you know, if for instance, for some reason your pass was, you know, not perfect or something like that, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of what the condition is where you'd end up sort of modifying like row position. But in whatever those scenarios would be, or an example like you realize that the disk, for instance, isn't lowering in time, like if you had some sensor, so your hydraulics were running slow that day, you would need to flush the queue and then establish a new set of action triggers or waypoints. So you might think about how you might flush the queue from whatever is generating the waypoint.
Sure, that makes sense. So I'm gonna ask the stupid question now. What is lifting a disk and setting a disk?
Oh, a disc is like it's an implement that tills the ground. So a tillage tool behind the tractor. And so, you know, the old way was like you would just go around the field and each time you'd go in, you know, 30 feet or whatever the width of the disc was different so that you don't work the ground twice. You'd overlap, you know, maybe 2, 3, 5 feet so that you don't miss any. But when you get to the end, you know, with the offset disc or vertical till, you'll pick the disc up, you'll turn around, and then you'll go back in the next row. And so it's like anything, putting a planter in the ground or whatever. So it's just, a disc is easy to conceptualize because there's no special monitoring or anything like that.
And you
Sure.
don't want to turn with a disc.
Yep.
With a disc lowered, you don't want your robot to turn.
Yeah, at least not much. It depends on if it's trailing or mounted, but yeah, you don't want to turn real hard with it.
Unless it's a one-way. Did you ever run a one-way, Kyler?
I have never run a one-way.
Oh man, you're missing out.
I miss out on a lot of things.
So yeah, kind of hard coding waypoints was step one into getting fluid dynamic motion, as well as getting more like semantic paths, I'll call it. I don't know if that's the right term, but yeah, those are really good things to think about.
Question on that behavior tree. If you have a sequence and you're having it drive the path, would you add, how do you add an action on that path? And would you do that inside of a behavior tree?
So I'm not as familiar with all the different kinds of sequence kind of control nodes that come with it, but I do know there are some schemes you can use to monitor. So
Okay.
I might tick an action to monitor every X amount of seconds, and then, you know, based on the semantics we put, we can say, okay, if you hit this condition on the monitor, do this.
Okay, very cool. Yep. I forgot about that. I'm just barely learning behavior trees, barely. So that's neat that it has what they call it a step. And so as it goes through that again, it can check those. Neat.
I'll suggest that there should, in operations that I do, there should always be only one upcoming action or upcoming action point, let's say. So you wouldn't need to loop through a bunch of actions. Just figure out what the next one is and then watch for that one. Does that make sense?
What's the wrong way of doing it, I guess?
Looping through all of the actions that are in the queue and saying, are we to this one yet? Nope. Are we to this one yet? Nope. Are we to this one yet? Because they're going to be in an order. So if you keep them in an order, then you only have to look for the next one.
Sure, and I think behavior tree allows for that, and that's the kind of basic idea is where, you have a tree of 3 actions, right? And once this one is done, this one occurs, is the basic, once this returns a success, this one occurs. But this could be a subtree, and I guess that's what I was talking.
Tree. Gotcha. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate the visual. I'm glad you have your camera on.
That's good. Alan, did you make any progress this week? Good evening, Colleen. How's the artificial intelligent world? They're in listen only mode.
Hey man, sorry, I was on mute. Oh, not much. I haven't touched that stuff in a while, so I don't have a big update on those.
It's good to see you again.
Yep, just want to come back, immerse myself, then slowly get back on track.
Doug or Ross or Kyler, do you have any other updates?
Well, I got one of those 180 kilogram larger servos to try and work into the controls on the swatter. I haven't integrated it yet. Also been doing a bit of work on using the Android as a brain for the robotics controls. That's something I was working on before, and I was putting some more time into that. And a lot of tractor maintenance and repair. A lot of diesel mechanics. Keep me busy, I guess.
I've been rewiring my cat. I had taken all the guts out of it, and then I realized one of my controls wasn't working well. It has a redundant switch in it. And the parking brake wasn't working, so I put an Arduino Nano in there to run the parking brake, and well, while I was there, I had it run the forward, neutral, reverse, and since I was that far, I did the throttle. I'm kind of curious. I have run Ross serial before for this. And I've done Pi Fermata, thanks to suggestions here. Both of those are kind of, they reset everything if you plug a USB device in. I don't want my tractor. I had this problem before where the tractor would freak out if I plugged my computer into it without shutting it down, because if the steering goes out for even a moment, the tractor it behaves the way you would think. I'd really like to be able to plug into a Nano and do things, and then unplug and have it just keep working. And so I wonder if there's a protocol already out there for that.
This was a huge issue for us on the boat stuff, and there was a workaround, and I have to do some Googling to find it again. We had to wire some things Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Someone else was saying something.
No,
I'm
no,
gonna
that's great.
Google.
But our a workaround, was that for Pi Fermata or for raw serial?
It was for raw cereal.
Raw serial. So you made it not do its normal initialization, something like that?
Something like that, and there was like a physical jumper we had to put somewhere to
Oh,
stop
yeah,
it from doing that.
that sounds familiar. Yes, because actually plugging into the USB, I think I remember hearing something about that. Plugging in did something. Okay, well, if anyone has information on that, I'd enjoy talking about it.
I don't really know the specific thing you're talking about, but I mean, is it possible just to add a FTDI chip and just run the data out that you want over RS-232 for a UART on the board?
Yes, and I wasn't very clear about what the situation is. I'm trying to make the tractor work manually, just so I can get in and drive it around without, I was hot wiring it before because of this broken switch. So that works great. It's just a manual pass through right now. What I'm wondering is, can I add USB control to it so that if I've got a computer plugged into it, that it could take over without the tractor shutting down for a moment, without the steering signal shutting down for a moment while it switches over to computer control. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, would a digital multiplexer solve the issue? You could have a digital mux, and you just have a switch, and it would swap the wires over. I
Oh
mean, it
yeah,
happens nearly instantaneously.
it's a lot of wires. It's a lot of signals, and I really need to run all the signals through the Arduino anyway. So it's not that I'm switching. It just needs to be that, oh, the Arduino, comes up and it does its thing, and it basically does a pass through of all the signals. It just reads the physical inputs and writes it out to the ECU, and then I just want to be able to plug in and do things with USB, but I don't want, excuse me, I don't want the act of plugging into the USB to make it start tripping out.
So
Yeah.
I think I sent something relevant in the chat, but in summary, they put a capacitor between the reset and the ground pin,
Ah.
right? Because
Okay.
your Arduino resets when you start a serial connection.
Okay.
Hopefully that works. But this rings a bell on what we
Good.
did in the past.
That's the kind of help that I wanted. I vaguely recall seeing something about this. This looks like a solution. Great. I will look into that more. Thank you.
Alan, you back? Are there any other topics for tonight?
How's your Delta arm going?
It's a little slow. Been working on a driver for that for a class, and then getting that working in ROS. I have control of it, but not the full driver yet. There's one upgrade possibly. It's upgrading the processor so that the ARM moves a little faster, but get it running. Try moving things around. I've got a treadmill, so I can act like that as the conveyor belt. See if it can pick stuff while it's moving by.
So it's a computer vision type of problem. You're gonna set a camera on it and.
Yeah. Yep. So you do machine learning. So you identify and then grab. Or if it was on the back of a tractor or something, you can plant or move things.
Hey, this is Alan. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little sidetracked there. So here's a question, kind of follow-ups to last week's. So I'm driving around in RViz with my rover. It would seem to me that there should be two things about the position. There should be the where the rover thinks it is in the simulation and where it actually is. Are those two different points that I could see, and then can I see how far apart it really is from what it thinks it is?
You can subscribe to ground truth. That's something typically that's published by your gazebo
Okay.
node. And usually there will be something called ground_truth. And then obviously you know where the robot thinks it is because of the ODOM message, right? ODOM? Yeah. So you can compare your ground truth and your ODOM and get the delta.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
based on your situation, you do have AMCL running and there is some localization occurring.
Tell me what that means again.
Yeah. AMCL is adaptive Monte Carlo localization, right?
Yeah.
And that you were running that last time you showed us the
Right.
demo.
Right.
So it is taking in sensor input, right? Like your simulated GPS, your simulated IMU. I don't know if it looks at IMU.
Right. Yeah.
And spits out a estimate.
Right. Yeah, and it had LiDAR. I don't know if you mentioned that, LiDAR, laser. So it's got, it's based on the objects it's seeing with the laser. Then it's that and IMU and that. I'm not sure if it's using GPS for this or not, but then out of those three different pieces, and the ODOM, right? It thinks it's driving. Because I had a situation where I was driving into a plant, and these are pretty tough plants. I mean, it was moving the world, and the plant was, or the rover was sitting still, the wheels were turning, and the whole world was moving. Or at least the rover thought that the world was moving when its wheels really should have been slipping. So it wasn't moving, but it thought it was moving. Like it kept thinking it was moving forward, so many feet per second or whatever, but it really was sitting still.
Okay, so is your odometry literally based on your wheel odometry and your wheel speed integrated?
I think that's one of the pieces of ODOM, yeah.
Okay, because now I'm wondering if you have AMCL running,
right?
but you're not actually doing anything with that. We'd have to look at your RQT graph.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But I wonder if what you're taking as your estimate is really simply your wheel speed integrated.
I'm just making a note here.
Sure.
Alan, are you running robot localization?
I'm not sure. Tell me more about what does that mean?
Ross, there's a package called robot localization.
Oh, gotcha.
Just wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look. So it's called robot localization.
Speaking of localization, has anyone noticed a product called, I think it's something like Moazure? It's a, oh, yep, Moasure. I'll encourage you to go to moasure.com and check it out, because they're doing what we all know you shouldn't do. They're integrating an IMU. Yeah, and apparently they're able to make it work.
So it's a measuring tool, like a tape measure or laser rangefinder type thing. So,
Yep, like an electronic tape measure.
interesting. So they don't have integration error.
They don't have what?
They don't have integration error, like no drift.
I would love to take it out and measure around and come back to a fixed point and see. I suspect that they have some software cheating going on, so that if you come back close to a point, it kind of like GPS puts you on the highway no matter what. Yeah, there's got to be more to it, but
Or some really, really good Kalman filtering, and they figured it out.
or we finally got cheap as heck fog. Who knows? But it's pretty cool looking. Yeah, I don't. I would say Kalman, but what do they? Well, they could have they could have multiple.
Accelerometer, magnetometer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. But nothing else. They don't have, as far as I can tell, they're not using GPS unless it only does work outside, which I don't think is the case. Yeah, I don't know.
I see them putting it up next to a tape measure. Maybe that's how they. It's like one of those hidden burial wires that tells you the outside outline.
I don't know.
I'm joking.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, it'd be really cool to be able to put a box in a robot and not have to worry about wheel odometry or GPS or anything. But I don't think we're there yet. But maybe we're farther along than I thought.
Has anybody explored like ways to cut down that type of like integration mirror by like, I don't know, exploiting some type of diversity? Like if they're substantially different devices, or I don't know. I guess they all have their errors, so you would have to find some way to know which one was correct. I don't know.
It's definitely been done. I mean, aircraft used basically IMUs, or inertial navigation systems, decades ago. But yeah, everything I've seen, at least for MEMS devices, it's not pretty. It falls apart way too quickly.
Are you still using those IMU2O bricks at all?
I have not been using the bricks. Lately, I think I've ripped them off of everything. I've been ripping everything apart. Open IMU looks really interesting to me these days. So that's
I have
what I've been
one.
using.
I have one in the, and maybe it's because I haven't dived into the programming of it. But the preloaded stuff is kind of neat and useful, but a little sketchy. I don't know how to say that. If you get one, you'll see. But
Do you know that they have they had an INS? They have an INS program for it, and I think it just came out with another version a little while ago. And I have not been back to it, but I'm itching to put a uBlocks on there with the INS.
yeah, the version with the like a Deutsche, it's either an amp seal or a Deutsche DT series plug. I
Oh,
think
you got that one. Yep.
It's a really neat unit. Like I say, there's some example programs to make it J1939, which is why I was interested in it. And just, spit the IMU data out continuously, and you just sample it on CAN bus. But yeah, the web UI for it is, maybe once you learn how to work with it, I'm just not that familiar.
Oh,
Maybe it's
geez.
easy.
Yeah, it drove me a little crazy. It impresses me that they were able to do it. I really don't like it. I would rather have something more direct.
Yeah, just an IDE would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Just some command line tools would be great. That's what I would rather have. But yeah, I was impressed that they were able to do it, and they've generally worked for me. So much better than having Windows only tools like so many do. Even uBlocks, the uBlocks command center, as far as I can tell, is Windows only. So that bites.
Yeah, I haven't seen it on Linux either, but I guess I haven't tried. Now I don't know. I wonder if that one runs in Wine or not. It might. You might try that.
I suspect that it does, and I have intended to try it, and I don't think I have yet, but I will.
Yeah, I think I would definitely buy more of the OpenIMUs. It's just, yeah, that's my only grievance with it, the sketchy web thing.
So what's
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, what's this web IDE? Is it, or could you scrape it somehow and get it to be a command line tool?
Oh, I bet you can. So there's actually a, what is it? Help me out here. There's a daemon that runs. You have to start a daemon. Then it uses WebSockets to talk to it.
Yeah,
So you just be
imagine like
duplicating work.
yeah, imagine like you have to start like a Python program that uses Django or something like that, and then the serial data comes into Django, and then it opens up in the web UI. So it was an interesting approach to kind of get a multi-platform app, basically. But it was a little difficult to work with.
Have you ever talked to the developers?
I haven't, no.
They're really cool. I don't think I've ever called a business, hardware business like this, and been so impressed by the people. They seem very genuinely interested in helping people use their product, and that was incredibly refreshing. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they came out with new tools if people ask for them.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think the hardware is amazing. Like they did everything right about the way that they mounted it and the connectors that they used.
Yeah, I like the Deutsch. I wanted to get that. I did not because I was warned off that something I wanted might not be implemented in it yet. But that's going to be the next version that I get.
Oh, and don't use odometry, right? That's the lesson I remember from our last conversation.
What is this about not using odometry?
Kyler doesn't like odometry.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
My
I don't use wheel odometry. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you saw the things I drive, wheel odometry is not very helpful. There's a lot of slippage going on.
Sure, and I guess if you rely on only wheel odometry, you'll get into the situation like Alan just talked about, where you're stuck on something. The wheels are turning, but you're still getting integrated wheel speed. Still, robot still thinks.
Yep. At least I have radar on my cat. I wonder if I could do something with that. It would be fun to use. I would like to use wheel odometry on some of the machines I'm working on, and maybe not even GPS. That's hard to think about, but yeah, usually GPS is just so darn easy that's what I go to.
I guess you could start to use a ground radar, not the type that you've got on there that just measures speed, but literally a ground radar that would give you like a 3D image.
Oh, so you're saying like what do they call it? Visual odometry? Using
VIO.
Yeah, but with radar
with
instead
ground
of
with radar. Awesome, because yeah, I really like the idea of visual odometry, but I don't want to deal with anything visual on a tractor. I mean, the dirt is just too much of a problem. But yeah, if you could do that with radar, that would be really cool if you could match it up well enough.
Dumb question, but doesn't dirt on your radar isn't that a problem?
Nope.
No? Okay.
I mean, unless you got a lot of dirt, and then you've got other problems. If you're buried,
Sure.
if you're buried up to the radar, yeah, I think it might be a problem.
Yeah.
Because I know on I guess Teslas and stuff, if you have snow, sometimes that blocks the radar from doing its job.
Yeah.
I thought
So it's the moisture, right?
it's the moisture.
Yeah. But yeah, I think tractor radar is pretty robust.
Well, moisture reflects, so
And it depends on the frequency. So I have, not on my tractor, but I have 77 gigahertz radar units that are directional. And I don't know if, yeah, I think of 1.2, 2.4 being water resonant, but I don't know if 77 is.
Oh, it would be interesting. Have you ever seen those ground penetrating radars they use on like NASA planes to survey ice and
Yeah,
those sorts of
yeah, that's what I was thinking you were intending.
Oh, well, I mean, no, I mean they make just a radar that scans like the surface, but yeah, then there's the ground penetrating version that looks beneath the surface. But that would be cool, yeah, because then you could
And
use like a sandstone in the field down 10 feet to identify as a waypoint.
right, and map it while you're at it, because that would be cool data to have.
Yeah, it might help you like fertilize your crop or whatever. Yeah, or if you're growing grapes, like you could add some, not irrigate them as much in that one specific area in hopes that it would reach that sandstone.
Mm-hmm.
My suspicion, though, is that the ground penetrating versions are wildly expensive, but maybe not.
It all gets cheaper eventually. I was only half kidding about fog. I have looked at fiber optic gyros, and I keep watching for articles about cheap ones, and I did find one recently that inexpensive fog is coming. Yeah, the things that are crazy expensive now will eventually be cheap.
I saw on eBay that was pretty cheap. Was one of those utility ones they use for detecting, pipes or wire lines under their surface. I was
Yep.
like, to take it and look for dinosaur bones.
And navigate from them.
Could be used for a really aggressive automated rock picker for your fields too.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I had someone, what was it? Someone asked about that, and I said, yeah, we just need to put those on a combine head and then come back and pick up all the rocks. You could have all your mapping done instead of wandering around aimlessly trying to find rocks.
On on the topic of radars, I think Nav2 there's some talk about support. I don't know if it's already been implemented for radar, standardized radar messages, and I think it was localization through radar messages, but don't quote me on that.
If you're interested in radar, I'll encourage you to look at Navtech. I have not done anything with them yet, but they're doing some really cool stuff. And yeah, I think radar is the way to go. So, or for what I do, and they look very interesting.
So Navtech was interestingly a sponsor of one of the boat competitions I would do. It's NAVTEK, right?
I don't think so. I think it's
Oh, okay.
NAVTECH.
Well,
I'll have to look.
okay. No, I think I got it completely wrong.
Now I'm trying to figure out where it is. I'm not seeing it. Maybe I had it. Navtech? NavTechRadar.com. I think that's it. They have a little radome device.
Yeah, that KT one is what you're looking at.
I haven't found it yet, but
KTS 350X.
there's some videos of them. As I recall, they're streaming point clouds in a Ross driver as they drive a car. And I wonder if I can find that.
Too bad you can't use some other like navigation thing, like I don't know, it's like clouds in the sky, or like if there was an air density.
What is it? Someone used magnetism in a way that I didn't even realize could happen.
Oh, because the Earth's magnetic field's irregular all over. Somehow they mapped it.
It was something like that. I can't remember it, but yeah, there are people being creative about it. Navtech Radar has a ROS compatibility page. Yeah, let's see. Yeah. Anyway, I have not done anything with them. I've just seen some really cool videos.
Cool.
Any more topics for tonight?
Or you could do the same thing with moisture mapping in the field. If there was some way to, right, like if the field wasn't flat, if you drive into a valley, I don't know.
I mean, at that point, it'd just be easier to put beacons.
Or use beacons that are in the sky already.
Yeah, you could put a few around the field and then you'd have them overlap in this pattern. Kind of triangulate, but more in a sphere. I think we're onto something.
I think we're on something. Yes. Thank you, Matt.
You bet.
Thanks for
Great seeing
listening,
everyone
Matt.
tonight.
Okay,
All right.
I'll
Denny,
see you later.
Later.
Doug, Kyler,
Good night.
Ross, Alan. Have a great
Good
week.
luck on your endeavors.
Night.
Yep, you as well.